Metropolis Heights was alive with energy on that warm summer evening. The streets buzzed with laughter, music, and the aroma of street food wafting through the air. It was the annual Summerfest, a celebration that brought people from all walks of life together. Vendors lined the sidewalks, selling everything from spicy tacos to glittering handmade jewelry. Families strolled hand in hand while teenagers laughed and took selfies near brightly lit photo booths. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves, except for Officer Mike Donovan. Mike wasn't having a good day. He had been called in early to deal with a minor traffic accident at dawn, then spent hours filling out paperwork instead of patrolling like he preferred. By the time he arrived at Summerfest, his patience was wearing thin. The crowd was massive, making it hard to move around, and the noise grated on his nerves. To make matters worse, his partner, Lisa, had taken a sick day, leaving him alone to handle any issues that might arise. As Mike pushed his way through the throng, trying to keep an eye out for trouble, he spotted someone towering above the rest of the crowd. It was Big Shaq, a local celebrity known for his enormous size and larger-than-life personality. Standing at nearly 7 feet tall with muscles rippling under his tank top, Big Shaq was impossible to miss. People loved him. He often performed freestyle raps at community events and always drew a cheering audience. But tonight he wasn't performing. Instead, he was standing near a food stall, laughing loudly as he chatted with friends. The problem started when Big Shaq accidentally bumped into the stall. His sheer bulk caused the entire structure to wobble dangerously. Trays of nachos slid off the counter and crashed onto the ground, splattering cheese and salsa everywhere. Plastic cups tumbled after them, rolling across the pavement like tiny, runaway cars. The vendor, a wiry man named Joe, shouted in frustration, "Hey, watch it," Joe yelled, waving his arms. "You're gonna ruin my whole setup." Big Shaq turned toward Joe, still grinning. "Relax, man," he said, holding up his hands. "It's just a little bump. No biggie." "No biggie," Joe snapped, pointing at the mess. "Do you know how long it took me to prep all this? And now look, it's ruined." The crowd around them began to murmur, some siding with Joe, others chuckling at Big Shaq's carefree attitude. One woman even pulled out her phone to record the scene, thinking it might go viral. Mike noticed the growing commotion and sighed heavily. Of course, something like this would happen on his shift. Pushing through the spectators, Mike approached the pair. "All right, everyone, step back," he said firmly, raising his voice to be heard over the chatter. When no one moved, he added, "This is official police business. Give us some space." Slowly, the crowd obeyed, though not without a few groans and muttered complaints. Once they were clear, Mike turned to Big Shaq. "Sir, I need you to calm down and cooperate. You've caused property damage here, and we need to resolve this peacefully." Big Shaq blinked, looking genuinely surprised. "Whoa, officer, chill out. I didn't mean anything by it, just clumsy, you know." He gestured toward the spilled food. "I'll help clean it up, no worries." But Mike wasn't convinced. Something about Big Shaq's laid-back demeanor rubbed him the wrong way. Maybe it was the cocky grin or the way he brushed off the situation like it was nothing. Whatever it was, Mike felt his temper flare. "You think this is funny?" Mike demanded, stepping closer. "You destroyed someone's livelihood because you weren't paying attention. That's not okay." Big Shaq raised an eyebrow, his smile fading slightly. "Look, dude, I said I'd fix it. What more do you want?" "I want you to take responsibility for your actions," Mike shot back, his voice rising. He was vaguely aware of the crowd starting to gather again, phones held high to capture the confrontation. Normally, he hated being recorded, but right now, he didn't care. All he could focus on was the frustration building inside him. Big Shaq crossed his arms, his expression turning serious. "Man, you're blowing this way out of proportion. I'm not trying to cause trouble." "You already have," Mike snapped. Without thinking, he reached for his baton, gripping it tightly. "If you won't listen, maybe I'll make you understand." Before anyone could react, Mike swung the baton, aiming for Big Shaq's arm. The crack of wood against flesh echoed through the street, followed by a collective gasp from the onlookers. For a split second, everything froze. Then Big Shaq staggered backward, clutching his arm where the baton had struck. But instead of yelling or retaliating, Big Shaq simply stared at Mike, his eyes narrowing. A strange sensation filled the air, like static electricity before a storm. Mike suddenly felt uneasy, as if he'd made a terrible mistake. Before he could say anything, a pulse of light erupted from Big Shaq's body, engulfing the area in a blinding flash. When the light faded, Mike found himself sprawled on the ground, dazed and disoriented. His ears rang, and his chest felt heavy, as though an invisible weight pressed down on him. Around him, the crowd murmured nervously, unsure of what had just happened. Someone helped him to his feet, but Mike barely registered their presence. All he could think about was the look in Big Shaq's eyes, a mix of anger, disappointment, and something else he couldn't quite place. "Officer," Big Shaq said quietly, his voice steady despite the chaos. "You have no idea what you've done." And with that, Big Shaq turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Mike stood there frozen, as the reality of the situation sank in. Whatever had just occurred, it was far bigger than a simple misunderstanding at a food stall. Somehow he knew his life would never be the same again. This part introduces the setting, characters, and conflict while maintaining a straightforward narrative style. It sets the stage for the mysterious consequences Mike will face later in the story. Mike's head throbbed as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. One moment he was standing in the middle of Summerfest, surrounded by a stunned crowd, and Big Shaq's parting words echoing in his ears. The next, everything had changed. He blinked rapidly, trying to adjust to the blinding whiteness that enveloped him. It wasn't just a room, it felt like an endless void, stretching infinitely in every direction. There were no walls, no ceiling, no floor, just pure, unbroken white. "What? Where am I?" Mike muttered, his voice trembling. He turned in circles, searching for any sign of life or landmarks, but there was nothing. His heart began to race, as panic set in. Was this some kind of prank? Had someone drugged him, or worse, was he dead? Before he could spiral further into fear, a deep, resonant voice filled the space. It wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that made Mike freeze in his tracks. "Officer Michael Donovan," the voice intoned. "You stand before me now, because you have violated universal laws." Mike squinted into the emptiness, trying to locate the source of the voice. "Who's there? Show yourself," he demanded, his tone wavering between anger and uncertainty. A figure materialized in front of him, tall and imposing. Its appearance was unlike anything Mike had ever seen. The being seemed humanoid, yet its skin shimmered with faint iridescent colors, shifting like oil on water. Its eyes glowed softly, radiating wisdom and power. Mike instinctively took a step back, his hand reaching for his baton, but it wasn't there. Panic surged again as he realized he was unarmed. "I am the Arbiter," the being said calmly, "and I serve as guardian of balance and justice across the cosmos." Mike stared at the creature, his mind racing. This had to be a dream, or maybe a hallucination. Aliens, cosmic justice? None of it made sense. "Look, whatever this is, I don't have time for games," he snapped, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Just send me back, okay?" The Arbiter tilted its head slightly, studying Mike with an expression that was both curious and disapproving. "Your actions have consequences far beyond your understanding, Officer Donovan. When you struck big, Shaq, you did not merely harm another individual, you disrupted the natural order." Mike frowned, shaking his head. "Big Shaq? That guy is just some oversized celebrity who bumped into a food stall. How does that involve cosmic justice?" The Arbiter raised one hand, and suddenly, images appeared around them, floating like holograms. They depicted scenes from earlier in the evening. Big Shaq laughing with friends, Joe yelling about his ruined nachos, and finally, Mike swinging his baton in anger. Each image froze at key moments, highlighting the emotions involved. Big Shaq's carefree demeanor, Joe's frustration, and Mike's boiling rage. "Big Shaq is not merely human," the Arbiter explained. "He belongs to the Varnithian race, an ancient species tasked with maintaining harmony within the universe. Their presence ensures stability among planets, dimensions, and civilizations. Your act of aggression has disrupted their work, creating ripples that could endanger countless lives. Mike's jaw dropped as he processed the information. Wait, so you're telling me that guy is an alien? And hitting him messed up space or something? In essence, yes, the Arbiter replied. But the repercussions extend beyond physical realms. Your lack of restraint reflects deeper flaws within your character, flaws that must be addressed if balance is to be restored. Mike clenched his fists, feeling defensive. Listen, I admit I lost my cool back there, but this is ridiculous. You can't hold me responsible for some intergalactic disaster I didn't even know about. The Arbiter's glowing eyes narrowed slightly. Ignorance does not absolve guilt, Officer Donovan. However, we acknowledge that your intentions were not malicious. Therefore, you will undergo 5 trials to prove your worthiness of redemption. Trials? Mike repeated, his voice rising. What are you talking about? Just let me go home. You misunderstand, the Arbiter said, its tone firm but calm. Failure to complete these trials will result in your permanent erasure from existence. Succeed, and you may return to your world, with certain conditions. Mike felt a chill run down his spine. Erasure? Non-existence? This couldn't be real. Yet deep down, he knew it was. Something primal inside him screamed that the Arbiter wasn't bluffing. Swallowing hard, he forced himself to nod. Fine. What do I have to do? The Arbiter gestured, and the void shifted. The whiteness faded, replaced by a dark, narrow alleyway lit only by flickering streetlights. The air smelled damp and stale, and distant sounds of traffic echoed faintly. Mike looked around, confused. Where am I now? This is your first trial, the Arbiter announced. The trial of compassion. Observe carefully. As Mike watched, 2 figures emerged from the shadows ahead. One was a young boy, no older than 10, clutching a small backpack tightly. His clothes were dirty, and his face bore traces of tears. Behind him loomed 2 menacing men, their faces obscured by hoods. They cornered the boy, blocking his escape. Hand over the bag, kid, one of the men growled, holding out a gloved hand. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The boy whimpered, backing away. Please. It's got all my stuff in it. My mom gave it to me. Mike's stomach churned. He recognized the scenario immediately. A mugging. But what was he supposed to do? Without his badge, gun, or radio, he was powerless. Still, he couldn't just stand by and watch. Hey, Mike shouted, stepping forward. Leave him alone. The hooded men turned toward him, startled. Stay out of this, buddy, one of them warned, pulling out a knife. This ain't your business. Mike hesitated, weighing his options. Charging in blindly would likely get him hurt, or worse, but calling for backup wasn't an option. Here either. Then he remembered the Arbiter's words. Compassion. This wasn't about brute force. It was about finding a way to resolve the situation peacefully. Taking a deep breath, Mike raised his hands in a non-threatening gesture. Look, guys, I get it. Life's tough sometimes, but this kid doesn't deserve to lose everything he owns. Let's talk this through, okay? For a moment, the men exchanged uncertain glances. Clearly, they hadn't expected negotiation. Seizing the opportunity, Mike continued. How about this? I'll buy you both dinner, whatever you want. Just walk away and nobody gets hurt. One of the men snorted. Dinner? Seriously? It's better than risking jail time, Mike countered. Think about it. If anyone sees you harassing a kid, you'll end up behind bars. Is that really worth it? After a tense pause, the second man lowered his knife. Fine. We're done here. With a final glare at Mike, the pair slunk back into the shadows, disappearing into the night. Mike exhaled sharply, relief washing over him. Turning to the boy, he knelt down. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? The boy shook his head, tears streaming down his cheeks. Thank you, mister. I thought they were going to take everything. It's all right, Mike said gently. You're safe now. Go home to your family, okay? The boy nodded and ran off, leaving Mike alone in the alley. As soon as the boy was gone, the scene dissolved, returning him to the white void. The arbiter reappeared, its glowing eyes fixed on him. "Well done," it said simply. "You demonstrated compassion and restraint. However, 4 trials remain. Are you prepared to continue?" Mike wiped sweat from his brow, his nerves still, jittery from the encounter. "Yeah," he said, forcing confidence into his voice. "Let's get this over with." With a wave of the arbiter's hand, the void shifted once more, plunging Mike into his next challenge. This segment introduces Mike to the surreal realm controlled by the arbiter and establishes the stakes of his journey. Through the first trial, readers see glimpses of Mike's potential for growth while maintaining tension and intrigue. Basic language keeps the narrative accessible, ensuring clarity without sacrificing depth. After the first trial, Mike felt a strange mix of relief and unease. He had passed, but the experience left him shaken. The weight of what was at stake pressed heavily on his shoulders. If one small failure could erase him from existence, how could he possibly succeed in 4 more tests? Still, there was no turning back now. Taking a deep breath, Mike nodded to the arbiter, signaling that he was ready for whatever came next. The white void dissolved once again, and this time, Mike found himself standing inside a burning building. Thick smoke filled the air, stinging his eyes and making it hard to breathe. Flames licked hungrily at the walls, consuming everything they touched. The heat was unbearable, and the crackling sound of fire echoed around him like a sinister symphony. "Welcome to your second trial," the arbiter's voice boomed, though it seemed distant as if coming from another dimension. "The trial of sacrifice." Before Mike could ask what that meant, 2 figures stumbled into view through the haze. One was a young child, barely 6 years old, clutching a stuffed teddy bear tightly. Her face was streaked with soot, and she coughed violently as she tried to move away from the flames. The other figure was an older man wearing a lab coat, his glasses cracked and his hair singed. Clutched under his arm was a metal briefcase, its edges glowing faintly with a blue light. Mike's instincts kicked in immediately. He rushed toward the pair, shouting over the roar of the fire. "Are you okay? Can you walk?" The man looked up, his expression desperate. "Help us, please." The little girl whimpered, her tiny legs trembling as she struggled to keep moving. Without hesitation, Mike scooped her up into his arms, shielding her from the worst of the smoke. But when he turned to help the man, something stopped him. The briefcase, the glowing blue light emanating from it, caught his attention. "What's in there?" Mike asked sharply, gesturing toward the case. "It's critical research," the man replied urgently. "A cure for a deadly disease affecting millions. If I lose this, countless lives will be lost." Mike froze, torn between 2 impossible choices. Saving the girl was instinctive. She was innocent and helpless. But the scientist's words carried immense weight. If the research truly held the key to saving millions, could he justify prioritizing one life over potentially millions? The fire roared louder, forcing Mike to act quickly. He glanced at the girl, then at the scientist. There had to be a way to save both. Thinking fast, he adjusted the girl in his arms and motioned for the scientist to follow him. "Stick close to me and don't let go of that case," he ordered. Navigating the inferno was no easy task. Every step felt like walking through molten lava, and the smoke burned his lungs with each breath. Mike used his body to shield the girl as much as possible, while keeping an eye on the scientist behind him. They reached a staircase leading upward, but the steps were partially collapsed, leaving only a narrow path. "Careful!" Mike shouted, guiding them carefully across the unstable surface. Just as they reached the top, part of the ceiling collapsed, blocking their way forward. Panic surged in Mike's chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He scanned the area desperately, looking for another escape route. That's when he spotted a window on the far side of the room. It wasn't large, but it might be enough. Summoning every ounce of strength, Mike sprinted toward it, carrying the girl and urging the scientist to keep pace. When they reached the window, he smashed it open with his elbow, shards of glass raining down. "Go!" he yelled, handing the girl to the scientist. "Get her out first." The scientist hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave without the case, but Mike gave him a firm shove, ensuring the girl made it safely outside. Then, with adrenaline coursing through his veins, Mike grabbed the briefcase and leaped through the window himself, landing hard on the ground below. As soon as they were clear, the building groaned ominously before collapsing into a fiery heap. Mike lay on the grass, gasping for air, his body aching from the ordeal. The scientist knelt beside the girl, checking to make sure she was unharmed, while clutching the precious briefcase tightly. "Well done," the arbiter's voice echoed softly. Within moments, the scene dissolved, returning Mike to the familiar, white void. Trial 3. Accountability. Before Mike could catch his breath, the void shifted yet again. This time he found himself standing in a quiet park, bathed in golden sunlight. Children played on swings nearby, their laughter ringing out like music. At first glance, it seemed peaceful, but then Mike noticed someone sitting alone on a bench. It was him, or rather, a younger version of himself dressed in his old police academy uniform. Young Mike sat slumped, staring at the ground with a mixture of guilt and shame etched onto his face. As present-day Mike approached cautiously, memories flooded back, painful ones he had long buried. "You remember this day, don't you?" the arbiter's voice asked gently. Mike nodded, swallowing hard. It was the day after he had arrested an innocent teenager for vandalism, knowing full well the kid hadn't done anything wrong. Back then, Mike had been eager to prove himself as a rookie cop, willing to bend the rules to get results. But deep down, he'd known it was wrong, and the memory still haunted him. Young Mike looked up, meeting his future self's gaze. "Why did I do it?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "I ruined that boy's life. His parents lost their jobs because of me. And for what? To boost my stats?" Present-day Mike crouched down, placing a hand on his younger self's shoulder. "Because I was scared," he admitted softly. "Scared of failing, scared of being seen as weak. I thought being tough meant never showing mercy." "And now?" young Mike asked, searching his eyes. "Now I know better," Mike replied firmly. "Being strong isn't about power. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard." As the words left his mouth, the scene began to fade, replaced by warmth and light. The arbiter appeared once more, nodding approvingly. "You have faced your past and acknowledged your mistakes. Let this lesson guide you moving forward." Trial 4. Courage. The fourth trial took place in complete darkness. At least it seemed that way at first. Slowly, shapes began to emerge from the shadows, forming a twisted mirror image of Mike himself. This version of him stood taller, broader, and radiated menace. Its eyes glowed red, and its lips curled into a cruel smile. "Hello, Officer Donovan," the monstrous reflection sneered. "I am everything you fear most. Your anger, your doubt, your weakness, all rolled into one." Mike backed away instinctively, his heart pounding. "What do you want?" "To destroy you," the creature replied simply. "To show you that you're not strong enough to change, not brave enough to face yourself." With a roar, the monster lunged at Mike, forcing him to dodge just in time. Blow after blow rained down, each strike testing Mike's resolve. Pain coursed through his body, but he refused to give in. Instead, he focused on the lessons he'd learned so far: compassion, sacrifice, accountability, and channeled them into courage. Summoning all his strength, Mike countered the attacks, fighting back with determination. With each punch, he confronted his inner demons, refusing to let fear control him. Finally, with one decisive blow, he struck the creature square in the chest, causing it to shatter like glass. "I'm stronger than you," Mike declared, panting heavily, "and I won't let you win." Trial 5. Redemption. For the final trial, Mike found himself in a war-torn village, caught between two factions locked in bitter conflict. Both sides blamed the other for their suffering, and neither showed any sign of backing down. Mike's task was simple yet daunting: negotiate peace. Using everything he had learned, Mike listened patiently to both groups, understanding their pain and grievances. He appealed to their shared humanity, reminding them of what they stood to gain by working together. Slowly, painfully, the seeds of reconciliation began to take root. By the end, leaders from both sides shook hands, agreeing to lay down their weapons. When the trial ended, Mike returned to the white void, exhausted but triumphant. The arbiter regarded him silently for a moment before speaking. "You have proven yourself worthy of redemption, Officer Donovan. But remember, your journey does not end here." This segment explores Mike's growth through increasingly challenging trials, emphasizing themes of morality, resilience, and transformation. Each test builds upon the last, showcasing his evolving character while maintaining suspense and emotional depth. Mike stood in the white void once again, his body aching and his mind reeling from the trials he had just endured. Each one had pushed him to his limits, physically, emotionally, and morally. He felt raw, as if layers of himself had been peeled away to reveal the core of who he truly was. For the first time in years, maybe even decades, Mike didn't feel like the hardened, by-the-book cop he'd always prided himself on being. Instead, he felt human. The arbiter materialized before him, its shimmering form radiating a calm, yet commanding presence. Its glowing eyes locked onto Mike's, and for a moment, Mike thought he saw something akin to approval flicker within them. But the arbiter's expression remained inscrutable, impossible to read fully. "You have completed all 5 trials," the arbiter said, its deep voice echoing softly through the endless expanse. "And you have done so with courage, humility, and a willingness to learn." Mike let out a shaky breath, relief washing over him. He hadn't realized how much he'd been holding on to the fear of failure until now. "Does this mean I passed?" he asked cautiously, still unsure of what awaited him next. "In a manner of speaking, yes," the arbiter replied. "However, passing does not absolve you entirely. Your actions carry consequences that cannot be undone." Mike frowned, tension creeping back into his muscles. "What do you mean? What happens now?" The arbiter raised one hand, and suddenly, images began to swirl around them. They depicted scenes from earlier that evening. The chaotic Summerfest, Big Shaq laughing, with friends, Joe yelling about his ruined nachos, and finally, Mike swinging his baton in anger. Each image froze at key moments, highlighting the ripple effects of his decision. "Your reckless act disrupted the natural order," the arbiter explained. "While your efforts during the trials have proven your potential for growth, the damage has already been done. Justice demands accountability." Mike swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I understand that I messed up. I struck Big Shaq without thinking, and it caused problems. Bigger ones than I ever imagined. But haven't I paid enough by going through these tests?" The arbiter tilted its head slightly as if considering his words. "You misunderstand, Officer Donovan. This is not punishment but correction. To restore balance, certain measures must be taken." "What kind of measures?" Mike pressed, his voice rising slightly despite his attempt to stay composed. "You will lose your position as a police officer," the arbiter stated plainly. "Your badge, your authority, they are symbols of trust and responsibility, which you abused. Therefore, they will no longer belong to you." Mike staggered back as if physically struck. Losing his job wasn't just a professional setback, it was an identity crisis. Being a cop was all he'd ever known. It defined him. Without it, who was he? "But what am I supposed to do?" he stammered, panic edging into his tone. "If I'm not a cop, then what?" "That is for you to decide," the arbiter replied calmly. "In addition to losing your position, your memories of the Varnethians, the trials, and my existence will be erased. You will return to your world with only the lessons learned intact. It is up to you whether those lessons shape your future or fade into insignificance." Mike stared at the arbiter, his mind racing. Erasing his memories sounded cruel, almost unbearable. How could he move forward without understanding why his life had changed so drastically? But even as he grappled with the idea, a part of him recognized the fairness in the arbiter's judgment. If he couldn't remember the specifics, perhaps he wouldn't dwell on them endlessly, allowing guilt or resentment to consume him. "And Big Shaq?" Mike asked hesitantly. "Is he okay?" Did I hurt him permanently? Big Shaq sustained no lasting harm, the arbiter assured him. His role as a Varnethian ensures his resilience. However, your actions have left an impression, one that serves as both caution and opportunity. Should you repeat such behavior, there will be no second chances. Mike nodded slowly, the weight of the arbiter's words settling heavily on his shoulders. There would be no excuses, no loopholes. If he failed again, the consequences would be final. Somehow, knowing that made his resolve stronger. He wouldn't squander this chance. Before we proceed, the arbiter continued, there is one final matter to address. A new image appeared between them, a vision of Metropolis Heights, bustling and vibrant as always. Within it, Mike saw glimpses of people whose lives he had impacted over the years. Victims he had helped, criminals he had arrested, colleagues he had worked alongside. Some faces smiled warmly, while others scowled bitterly. Each represented a piece of his legacy as a police officer. These individuals reflect your influence, the arbiter explained. Some benefited from your actions. Others suffered because of them. Redemption lies not in erasing the past, but in shaping the future. Use this opportunity wisely, Officer Donovan. With that, the vision faded, leaving Mike alone with the arbiter once more. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever came next. All right, he said firmly. Do what you have to do. The arbiter nodded, raising both hands. A soft glow enveloped Mike, warm and soothing, yet tinged with sadness. As the light intensified, memories began slipping away. His encounter with Big Shaq, the strange energy surge, the white void, the trials, all fading into oblivion. Yet amidst the loss, a quiet certainty remained. Somewhere deep inside, Mike knew he had changed. Whether consciously or unconsciously, he would carry the essence of those lessons forward. When the light finally dimmed, Mike found himself lying in bed, staring at the ceiling of his modest apartment. Sunlight streamed through the window, painting the room in golden hues. For a moment he lay there disoriented, unable to shake the feeling that something monumental had happened. But try as he might, he couldn't recall exactly what. Shaking, off the unease, Mike climbed out of bed and got ready for the day. As he stepped outside, the familiar sights and sounds of Metropolis Heights greeted him. People hurried along the sidewalks, cars honked impatiently, and vendors called out to passers-by. Everything seemed normal, ordinary even. Yet as Mike walked through the streets, he noticed things differently. He saw the tired mother juggling groceries while her toddler tugged at her sleeve. He heard the frustration in a delivery driver's voice as he argued with a customer. He observed the graffiti-covered walls of a nearby alley and wondered about the stories behind them. For reasons he couldn't explain, Mike felt compelled to act, not as a cop, but as a person. When he spotted a group of teenagers bullying a younger boy near the park, he intervened, using calm words instead of threats. At the grocery store, he helped an elderly woman carry her bags to her car. Small acts perhaps, but meaningful nonetheless. As days turned into weeks, Mike found himself spending less time dwelling on his loss, and more time figuring out how to contribute positively to the community. He started volunteering at a local youth center, mentoring kids who reminded him of his younger self, the angry, confused version desperate for direction. Though he missed the structure of his old life, he discovered a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Big Shaq continued his usual routine, performing freestyle raps and spreading joy wherever he went. Occasionally, he would pause mid-performance, a distant look crossing his face as though sensing something profound had shifted. But whenever someone asked if anything was wrong, he would simply grin and say, "Nah, man, everything's cool." Unbeknownst to either of them, the arbiter watched silently from afar, satisfied that balance had been restored for now. And so, life went on, with both men forever changed by an encounter neither fully remembered, but one that had shaped their paths in ways neither could have anticipated. This segment ties together the themes of justice, redemption, and personal growth, offering closure while leaving room for reflection. Through Mike's journey, readers witness the transformative power of accountability and the importance of learning from one's mistakes. Basic language ensures accessibility, while emotional depth keeps the narrative engaging. Months had passed since the strange and inexplicable events that changed Mike Donovan's life forever. Though he couldn't remember the details of what happened that fateful night at Summerfest, something deep inside him felt different. It was as if a switch had flipped, altering the way he viewed the world and his place in it. Gone was the rigid, rule-bound officer who once saw justice as black and white. In his stead stood a man eager to make amends, not just for one reckless act, but for all the moments where he'd fallen short. Mike's new routine took him far from the police station and into the heart of Metropolis Heights community. He spent most of his days at the Oak Ridge Youth Center, mentoring troubled teens and organizing workshops on conflict resolution and self-discipline. The kids called him Coach Mike, a nickname he wore proudly despite its simplicity. To them, he wasn't just some ex-cop trying to find purpose. He was someone who listened, who understood their struggles, and who genuinely cared about helping them succeed. One afternoon, as Mike sat in the center's small cafeteria sipping coffee, he overheard two boys arguing loudly near the basketball court. One of them, a wiry teenager named Jamal, pointed accusingly at the other. "You cheated, I saw you push me." The accused boy, Darnell, rolled his eyes. "Man, stop being soft, this ain't kindergarten." Mike sighed, setting down his cup. He'd seen this scene play out countless times before, kids letting anger get the better of them, escalating minor disagreements into full-blown fights. Rising from his seat, he approached the pair calmly, holding up his hands to signal peace. All right, let's take it down a notch," Mike said, stepping between them. "What's going on here?" "He fouled me," Jamal shot back, glaring at Darnell. Darnell crossed his arms defiantly. "I didn't do nothing wrong. Ask anyone, they'll tell you." Mike glanced around at the handful of spectators watching nervously. Instead of jumping to conclusions or assigning blame, he turned back to the boys with a thoughtful expression. "Okay, so we've got two sides to the story. Let's figure this out together. Jamal, why don't you explain what happened first?" Jamal hesitated, clearly surprised by Mike's calm demeanor. After a moment, he began recounting the incident, describing how Darnell had pushed him during a critical play. When he finished, Mike nodded and looked at Darnell. "Your turn." Darnell shrugged, still defensive but less combative. "Yeah, maybe I touched him a little, but it wasn't no big deal. He's acting like I killed somebody." Mike studied, both boys carefully recognizing the frustration simmering beneath their words. "Here's the thing, guys," he said evenly. "Sports are supposed to be fun, right? But when we let our tempers take over, nobody wins. So instead of fighting about it, why don't you shake hands and agree to play fair moving forward?" For a tense moment, neither boy moved. Then, reluctantly, Darnell extended his hand. Jamal hesitated before accepting it, muttering, "Fine, but no more cheap shots." "Deal," Darnell replied, though his tone lacked conviction. Mike smiled, faintly, satisfied that the situation hadn't spiraled out of control. As the boys returned to the game, he lingered on the sidelines, reflecting on how much his approach to conflict had evolved. Once upon a time, he might have barked orders or threatened punishment to restore order. Now he prioritized understanding and communication, striving to teach rather than command. Elsewhere in the city, Big Shaq continued to shine as the larger-than-life personality everyone adored. His presence brought joy wherever he went, whether he was rapping freestyle at street festivals or volunteering at food banks. Despite his fame, he remained grounded, always willing to lend a helping hand or share a laugh with strangers. Yet, there were moments when Big Shaq paused, sensing an inexplicable shift in the air, a fleeting awareness that something profound had occurred. These episodes puzzled him, but he chalked them up to stress or fatigue. After all, life as a celebrity wasn't without its pressures. Still, whenever someone asked if everything was okay, he brushed it off with his trademark grin. "Nah, man, everything's cool," he'd say, dismissing any concerns. One evening, after performing at a charity event, Big Shaq found himself walking home alone through the quiet streets of Metropolis Heights. As he passed by the park where Summerfest had taken place months earlier, memories stirred within him. Faint echoes of laughter, music, and chaos. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks, staring at the spot where the infamous nacho stand had collapsed. For reasons he couldn't explain, the image of Officer Mike Donovan flashed in his mind. Big Shaq shook his head, chuckling softly to himself. "Man, that dude was wild," he muttered under his breath. "Hope he learned his lesson." Little did he know Mike had learned his lesson, not just about restraint but about responsibility, compassion, and the importance of using power wisely. Somewhere across dimensions and realms beyond human comprehension, the Arbiter observed, silently, pleased that balance had been restored. Back at the youth center, Mike wrapped up another long day of mentoring and activities. As he locked up the building and headed toward his car, he noticed a familiar face waiting for him near the curb. It was Joe, the vendor whose nacho stand had been destroyed during the Summerfest incident. Joe stepped forward, looking sheepish, but determined. "Hey, can we talk for a sec?" Mike froze, startled by the unexpected encounter. Joe hadn't spoken to him since that chaotic night, and Mike assumed the man harbored resentment toward him. Nodding cautiously, he gestured for Joe to follow him to a nearby bench. "I wanted to apologize," Joe began awkwardly, twisting his cap in his hands, "for blaming you for everything that happened. Turns out, my insurance covered the damages, and business has actually picked up since the whole viral video thing." Mike blinked, unsure of how to respond. "Thanks for saying that, Joe. I appreciate it." Joe hesitated, then added, "And, I heard about the work you're doing with the kids. That's good stuff, man. Keep it up." A warm sensation spread through Mike's chest, catching him off guard. "I will," he promised sincerely. "Thanks for stopping by." As Joe walked away, Mike sat quietly on the bench, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky blazed with hues of orange and pink, painting the city in a soft glow. For the first time in months, he felt truly at peace, not because he'd fixed everything or redeemed himself completely, but because he was actively working toward becoming a better version of himself. Later that night, as Mike lay in bed replaying the day's events in his mind, he drifted into a dreamlike state. Visions of glowing beings, burning buildings, and shadowy monsters flickered at the edges of his consciousness, teasing fragments of memories he couldn't quite grasp. Yet, even in sleep, a sense of clarity lingered. Whatever trials he had faced, whether real or imagined, they had shaped him into the person he was today. When morning came, Mike woke refreshed and ready to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead. He knew the road to redemption wasn't easy, nor was it ever truly finished. But each step forward, no matter how small, counted. And for now, that was enough. High above the city, invisible to mortal eyes, the Arbiter watched over Metropolis Heights, ensuring that balance prevailed. Though its role was often misunderstood, it took solace in knowing that individuals like Mike Donovan and Big Shaq played vital parts in maintaining harmony. Mistakes would continue to happen, imperfections were inevitable, but growth, accountability, and resilience ensured that hope endured, even in the darkest of times. And so life went on, with both men forever changed by an encounter neither fully remembered, but one that had left an indelible mark on their souls. This final segment wraps up the story by showing how Mike's transformation impacts those around him while tying loose ends related to Big Shaq and the Arbiter. Simple language ensures accessibility, while emotional depth keeps readers engaged until the very last word.